today we're going to be talking about bus safety. We're going to talk about safety at a bus stop. We're going to talk about safety around the bus, inside the bus, and we're going to do an emergency evacuation. Do you guys know what that means?
No.
No?
Are we gonna go through the roof?
No, we're not going to go through the roof. So just like a couple weeks ago, you all had a fire drill. It is just like that, but in a bus. Just like you guys went on the sidewalk, we're going to do the same thing at a safety point. So that's our plan today. The first thing we're going to talk about is bus stops. I know some of you don't ride the bus, but you might someday. The biggest rule at a bus stop is to keep your hands to yourself. If you're pushing or playing around, even with a sibling or a friend, if it's for fun, if they end up in the road, they're going to get seriously hurt. So it's better to stay on the sidewalk and your hands to yourself. Another thing is to keep all your belongings in your backpack so nothing gets lost. Even inside the bus, if you forget something, we look, but we don't always see everything, so it might not be there when you come back the next day. The next important rule is there's no pushing or shoving. Even when it's cold like it is today, and it's going to get a lot colder, you're all excited that you're getting in that bus, that's heated bus, warm bus. You guys have to wait for the bus to stop. If that bus is still rolling and it's slippery out and you're on the road, it can slide right to you and that bus will be on top of you, and no one wants that. So when you're at a bus stop, the bus will be coming to you and it'll have amber lights, the orange lights, just like that. That's saying, hey, drivers, there's kids around, they need to slow down. And when that bus comes closer and completely stops and it opens its doors, red lights will be activated and the stop sign will come out. We call it that stop arm. That is telling drivers to stop. It is the rule to stop, it is the law to stop, but sometimes they don't. Even though they're supposed to stop, they don't always. So it's your responsibility to look for cars at all times when you're on the road. Even when you think they see you, they don't always see you, so it's better to assume that they can't. All buses have a 10-foot bubble. I call it the danger bubble. So if you're within that 10-foot bubble, the driver can't always see you. What's your name?
Harris.
What?
Harris.
Harris, come here. I want you to stand right there for me. So right now, our friend Harris is inside the danger bubble, and our driver can't really see him. This is why we always stay away from the bus as fast as we can. When we get off the bus, we go 10 feet that way. Thank you. You can go back.
How do we know where 10 feet is if we can't?
So 10 feet, that's a good question. How do you know?
10 steps.
That's very good. It's 10 big steps is how you get 10 feet away from the bus. Usually it's to the sidewalk. Usually 10 feet is to the sidewalk. But now, what if you have to cross the street? Who crossed the street before? Everyone? What is the biggest rule when you cross the street? Look both ways. Good job. Twice.
No, once. Both ways, twice. I'm going full speed and I just go right through it even though because there's no car.
But you always have to look for cars. So your question is, how do you know what 10 feet is? When I'm getting off the bus and I'm all excited, I still need to get away from the bus. And when I need to cross the street, I go 10 feet in front of the bus, which is basically where we are now. So if I want to cross the street, even though I'm really excited and I want to go home and probably eat something, because I used to be always hungry after school, I would look at the bus driver. The bus driver is going to look in his or her mirrors to see if there's cars coming. When they look and they see no cars, they're going to give us a little wave or a thumbs up and saying we can cross to the end of the bus. This is where the cars are going to be if they miss that stop sign. So this is where you have to look for cars. You look left, you look right, and left again. And if there's no cars, you can continue on. When you're going to the bus stop, you still have to look for cars. And then you look at your bus driver. You look left, you look right, and left again. If there's no cars, you look at your bus driver. He is going to look as well, and he will look in his mirrors, but those mirrors don't always see everything. So it's very important that you look as well. And even when you're leaving, you're so excited, you have to look for cars when you're running across the street. You shouldn't be running anyway. Another thing is you don't stop in the middle of the street. If your friend or your sibling is just getting off the bus, you need to pick a side of what street you're going to be on. So right now we're going to get inside the bus. It's a little bit warmer in the bus, thankfully. And the biggest rule for being on the bus is to stay seated at all times. Your bottoms are to the seats and your backs are to the backs, which all of you are right now. Your arms and your legs are inside your seat, so if I needed to go back to the back, I can without bumping into you. As I said outside, there's some of you are 2 to a seat, some of you are 3. There cannot be more than 3. Another rule for the bus is there's no eating on the bus. If you're eating your goldfish or a piece of pizza and this driver hits a bump or a speed bump, you can choke. It is our responsibility to perform CPR and first aid measures to help you. That is scary for us, it is scary for you, and it's scary for the kids around you. So it's always best to save eating for at home or at school. What's your question? Yeah, that's true. It's always good if you're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing to remind your friends. And if they don't listen, it's just tell your bus driver. Another thing is there's sometimes an emergency. An emergency can just be a small incident, just like if you have an upset tummy or you need a Band-Aid, all you have to do is tell your bus driver. That's another reason why we use inside voices while we're in the bus, is because if I'm all the way in the back and I need something from the bus driver, I can't get up and walk down the aisle while he's driving. So you need to raise your hand, yell, "Hey bus driver," or learn the driver's name. Another emergency is if the bus breaks down. That can happen. Some buses are a lot older than others and happens kind of often. But that's okay. You guys are still safe inside the bus, and you guys need to remain seated and patient while another bus comes rescue guys. Yeah.
But what happens if you don't have seatbelts?
So that's a good question. What happens if we don't have seatbelts? As you can see, none of you have seatbelts except the driver. That is mostly because there are so many kids on the bus at all times. So if there was an emergency, we don't want to have to get stuck by seatbelts in order to evacuate. Yeah.
I know why you don't have seatbelts. It's safe because it's like an airbag.
That's another good point. He said it's safe without seatbelts because if we were in an accident or we had to stop hard, your heads would hit this in front of you, and it's just like your own little airbag. That is why you always face forward in the bus. Yeah.
That would still hurt.
It would still hurt. It would. But guys, it would still hurt. But hopefully that never happens, and that's why if it does happen, you guys are prepared by facing forward and on your bottoms. Just like I said before, the biggest rule for on the bus is staying seated. So if you're climbing on top of this or standing up, like those girls back there, they're all standing up just to see me, which is fine because we're not moving. It's okay. But right now, if we stop hard or we get hit by another vehicle, if your head were to keep going, your neck would hit this. And that would hurt a lot worse than your strong skull in your forehead.
Your skull isn't really strong. It's
So
actually pieces.
another emergency is if there was an accident or if there was a fire. Now, if there was a fire on the bus, chances are it would be in the engine or up front. And if that happens, we can't use this door. We don't go towards fires. That's not a thing. So, so we have other means to exit. Excuse me.
There's a door back there. There's a door there.
Guys. So there is an emergency hatch. This is, girls, there is an emergency hatch. Most of the time this is open just like this, just for ventilation. That is the most we use of these. I've opened one by accident and I could never close it again, so we don't do that. But there is another emergency exit is right here, these red handles. Do you hear that? That's the emergency alarm. That is telling people inside the bus and outside the bus that there's an emergency and the driver might need help. So another emergency exit is the back door. Now, if there was an emergency, the back door is the one we would most likely use. That is why we're going to practice an emergency evacuation today. Yeah.
Oh, no.
So if there was a fire in the back, that's a good question. It would most likely be caused by another student. That's why it's very important to communicate with your bus driver if someone's not following the rules. But if there was a fire in the back, we would use this door.
But what if that door is also blocked?
Then we use the side doors.
What if every door is blocked? Then we break a window open. Or we open
Yeah.
with our bare hands.
Okay, guys, we're getting off track. So if there was, yeah, what's your question?
I can see someone standing outside the window.
So that's a good question. Guys,
Wow.
listen. She asked if we have to use the side doors if there's a ladder. There's not a ladder. But that's why you guys will be safe getting out, and that's why we're practicing, and hopefully there's another adult willing to help you. Hold on. If there was an emergency, the driver would pull over, stop, stand up, and tell you what's going on. We're going to pretend that there's an emergency in the front. I'm stopping and I'm standing up, and we're going to use the back door. Another thing that the driver will tell you is the safety point. Just like for a fire drill, you guys went on the sidewalk to be safe. Our safety point is in the grass right here. I will meet you out there, but if I was the only adult on this bus, you guys all have to meet there, because if there's 50 of you and I only count 48, I have to come back to this bus and find the missing students. So if this was a real emergency, you guys need to line up in our safety point. What's your question?
Why would we go out that way? Because all we'd get stuck on is the top of the bus.
So that's a good question. The only scenario that I can think of for using the hatch is if the bus tips over or if the bus goes in water. That is the only two scenarios that I can think of. So it's very unlikely. The most reason we would evacuate a bus, we would use the back door. That is why we're practicing today. Yeah.
But what if we're already all the way in the water and we can't get out?
If we were in water, we would still be able to use the emergency doors. So right now we're going to pretend that there's an emergency. We're going to do an evacuation drill. So starting in the back, we're going to line up in the middle, and we're going to sit on our bottoms and scoot. And then all of you are going to meet at the safety point. Okay? So boys and girls, you just safely evacuated a bus in case there was an emergency. Chris. So if there was an emergency, this is our safety point. If I'm the only adult on this bus and there's 2 students missing, I'd have to leave you guys here and go to the bus and find them, emergency or not. So this is very good that you guys are in a line, you're not running around or pushing, and your voices are off so I can efficiently, accurately, and quickly count all of you. Like I said, I sometimes have 70-some kids on my bus. That's a lot of kids to count to make sure everyone's there. And if I am the only adult, you guys stay at the safety point until the driver or your teachers tell you otherwise. What's your question?
But what if there's a fire and their whole bodies start on fire?
So if you get on fire, if your clothes catch, stop, drop, and roll. If your clothes gets on fire, you stop, drop, and roll. Yeah.
Stop, drop, and roll does not work.
It does. So you guys did very well today. What's your question? No.
No, we're not gonna.
So I know you guys have more questions, but I want you to keep them for your teachers. Your teachers are trained and know the answers.
What if you die?
Okay. So I really appreciate you guys and your teachers for taking the time out of their day to come do this. You guys did very well, and I hope you learned something so you can be the leaders next year. The kindergartners are going to look up to you for answers.
What if you are?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.